Welcome to the Empowering Voices of Harmony, Cold Journeys to Mental Health Wellness. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we work. We pay our respects to elders, past and present, and we extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples tuning in today. A disclaimer that this podcast is intended for educational purposes only and should not be relied on as personal advice. Always seek the guidance of your doctor, psychologist, or other qualified health professionals regarding your physical and/or mental health. If you're experiencing a crisis, call 000 or Lifeline on 13 11 14 for suicide prevention services. Lifeline also offers SMS service on 0477 13 11 14. To learn more about Mental Health Foundation Australia, visit our website at mhfa.org.au. You can also follow us for updates on Instagram, Twitter or Facebook. You can also call us at 1300 643 287 or email us at admin@mhfa.org.au.
Hello, my name is Delara, and in today's episode of Empowering Voices of Harmony, we'll be talking about the Australian African youth experience. It's quite easy to see that Australian African youth have unfortunately been misportrayed in the media, especially in regards to their lives, experiences, and essentially just who they are. The Australian media does tend to exaggerate certain events and instances in regards to the African community, and this has unfortunately caused some Australians to view African Australians in a stereotypical and sometimes negative light. Of course, African Australian youth, just like anyone else in Australia with an immigrant background, deserves to have their story heard and recognised. When you look past the stereotypical headlines and the negative media representation, what you essentially see is just people who are on their own journeys and trying to live fulfilling lives. So today I'll be talking with Sibi, who is happy to share his own experience. Sibi has gone through loss, challenges, and has lived in many different places across Australia, but he's been able to cope with these challenges through his love for the gym, film, and media. Hopefully through this episode, our viewers, as well as myself, can get a better understanding of the Australian African youth experience. So yeah, Sibi, thanks for coming along.
I'm happy to be here, thank you.
So I'd like to start off by saying, could you tell us a little bit about your life growing up?
Okay. So a little bit about my backstory is both my parents, they were both born in Nairobi, Kenya. And at the time, my dad was playing basketball and my mom was really into computers. So they met like relatively young, and they ended up moving to South Africa because my father wanted to pursue a career in being a doctor and in the health field. And so when he started doing university in South Africa and had a good time there, and then they ended up moving to Australia in the year 2000 in like a small town in South Australia called Mount Gambier. And they already had my brother. He was born in 96, so he came here when he was 4. So he immigrated quite young to Australia as well. So he was able to be part of the Australian experience. But 2 years later, they ended up having me in 2002, and that's a bit of my backstory out there.
So what was it like for you moving from like place to place while you were growing up?
Well, I was relatively young when we kept moving around, so it didn't really affect me too much. I guess the big move that kind of affected me was maybe from Mount Gambier to Adelaide, because I moved from a small town to like a bigger city, which kind of I get to it kind of changed me a little bit.
Bit of a cultural shock.
Yeah. Because a lot of people, and also from Adelaide to Melbourne, it's also a bit of a culture shock.
So, what was it like moving from South Africa to Australia? What was your experience like in the migration process and when you've lived here?
Well, I'll take it back a little bit. One of the reasons why they left South Africa in the first place is there was a lot of like xenophobia because at the time, during the late 90s and 2000s, a lot of people from the like Zulu tribe, they were afraid that other Africans were coming in and taking their jobs. Um, and I'll say from like South Africa to Australia, um, when they moved into our little town, like I heard some stories. It was a bit tough at first because these people were kind of different. My like that's the perspective the community had to my parents at the time. They were a little bit different, but they ended up getting involved in community events and sort of making a name for themselves, and things kind of moved a bit smoothly at that time. So yeah.
So, you mentioned earlier that people were looking at your parents differently. How was your experience here in Australia? Did you ever feel like people were looking at you that way as well?
Well, I think I forgot to also mention with my when they first came here, I remember my mom telling me someone told her to go back to her country and stuff, and but she didn't. When I was younger, I wasn't really at the time sort of like exposed to that type of stuff because my mom also kept it in the wraps for me. So I'll say when I got a bit older, when I went to Adelaide, it like could not be hidden from me anymore. And I started going out there in the world, and I got to learn a bit more about it. And I'll say like one experience I've had, because the most of the things I got when I was a bit younger was just like looks, and I was like, yeah, I just got looked at, and I knew like, oh, it's because I'm kind of different. So I say, yeah, one experience I probably had was when I was in Bunnings, and I walked in, and because my friend works there, and he like I came in there with my brother, and then he apparently heard over the radio someone said like two Africans came to the store, keep an eye on them, and from then on, it kind of told me, okay, I have to remain small when I'm coming into like places like supermarkets or Bunnings warehouses and all that, because at that time we were still at the boiling point of the African crime sort of like craze in the media, and yeah.
How did that make you feel?
Yeah, so it kind of just like told me, like, okay, so I'm perceived as a threat when I'm coming to places and when I'm meeting people. I'm at first perceived as a threat before, like a person. So yeah, it told me, yeah, I had to, put on a good face for people and all that.
Do you still feel that way now, or do you feel like you've moved on from that a little bit?
It's like a little bit here and there. Sometimes I feel like that some days, but I try and sort of like push through it and just be like, okay, I'm just gonna be me. It doesn't matter. I'm not like harming or doing anything wrong. So I'm just gonna continue doing what I do.
Yeah, you do you.
Yeah.
So, when you were growing up, what sort of social and cultural values were you around, and how did that impact your school and your work life?
Well, I say one of the biggest is probably the importance on education, because my parents, they worked hard to come here, and through the process of doing university and exams, it's a lot harder. Like back in South Africa or Kenya, than it is here. So I guess they came with the mindset that their children are going to have the best education, are going to really work hard, and yeah, that kind of like shift my perspective a little bit.
Do you feel like a bit of pressure to do well because
Yeah.
they moved here?
Yeah, I did when I was younger. I was wondering, because I was working pretty hard, and I was doing, after school, stuff like QMon, and like they even bought their own books, maths books and English books for me to do. So I was wondering if other kids did this as well. It wasn't only me, but yeah.
So you've mentioned that you've lived in Mount Gambier, Perth, Adelaide.
Yeah.
What was your experience like growing up as an Australian African youth in an area that was predominantly a wider population?
So, Mount Gambier, when I was born there and grew up there, I was quite young. So I didn't, I kind of had this mindset like, oh, well, like, I didn't really think of myself as different, in a way. Um, so I kind of grew up with the Australian experience there. And it was kind of a small community, so everyone knew who we were. So it wasn't, nothing too crazy happened really. Um, then I moved to Adelaide, and that's when I got to learn about racism and prejudice and things like that through like experiences we've had. Um, so yeah, there were many some like off experiences in Adelaide. It wasn't too bad, but when I came to Melbourne in like maybe the point of like when the media was harping on like African crime and African youth crime, and I came there in 2017. So yeah, there was a lot of pressure to put on a good face for the public and to sort of like make yourself small. But then like as I grew older, I stopped caring quite a lot, and yeah, just started to be an individual.
So I want to shift the topic more towards mental health.
Yeah.
I know that your father's passed away, and I honestly couldn't even imagine what that felt like or feels like. What have you done to cope with the grief, and do you still use those coping strategies today?
Well, so when it occurred, I was quite young, so I was like 2 years old. So I didn't have like a really a memory of it, but but my brother dealt with grief from it. So one of the ways he was able to overcome it, I've learned when I grew a bit older, was my mom gave him a book called I Can Handle It. And in the book, it stated that if you lose someone to loss, you should just remember the good times you had with them. And I kind of took on that quote, and I use it now.
I've personally lost someone as well, so I agree. It's good to remember all the good times. How is mental health addressed in African culture, and has it had any impact on your own mental health journey?
Well, with mental health in African communities, what I've learned is the first generation that's come here, they kind of understood it a bit because they came here, usually thinking like, okay, so this is the good life. Like we moved to Australia, there should be no mental health because life in back home is back in Africa is like it's pretty hard. So it's not really like mental you feeling mental health. It's like like feeling sad or depressed. It's fairly common there because it's hard living. So here they kind of wonder why are all our sons and daughters why are a lot of them feeling sad and depressed because this is meant to be the good life, and then I think they kind of learnt about it a little bit, and especially there's some African students that move to Australia for university, and a lot of them they kind of lose touch. Like they kind of because in Africa it's like like your family's got you, your family, your mother, your father. But here they're all alone. So sometimes they turn to drugs and drinking and all that. And I think the way that the parents address it is through community service, like getting people involved in communities, which is really good. But I say like our generation, that's the second gen in of African Australians. They since we intermingled with a lot of other groups and like got there's a lot of education on mental health in Australia. We understand it now. So I think it's moving to a positive direction.
Yeah, I totally get that because I come from a Turkish background, and I feel like it's a bit similar in terms of the older generation especially don't really have that much of an awareness about mental health compared to the younger generation.
Yeah.
How has your African identity influenced your sense of belonging and self-identity, and have you experienced times where you've been caught between two cultures?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, like I moved around a lot, so I dealt with like a lot of different cultures, a lot of different people. So I say, obviously when I was in Mount Gambier, it was mostly it was very like such an Australian culture, in Mount Gambier, because it's a small town, it's a country town type of vibes. Um, so I just grew up, just being Australian. I didn't know anything else when I was younger. And then when I moved to Adelaide, there was more Kenyans there. So that's when my mom started cooking more Kenyan food. I started, learning some words in Swahili. I even went to Swahili school, and it was a bit tough because I didn't really learn Swahili, when I was much younger. So it's kind of tough to keep up in Swahili school. Teachers didn't really like me too much. Um, yeah, because I was a bit mischievous, but because I couldn't really understand it.
So did you feel like you had to cause trouble?
Yeah, perhaps, yeah.
Yeah.
I was kind of caught between cultures then, and then also when I went to school, it was good because I got to intermingle with different cultures. Because the first school I went to in Adelaide was multicultural, so I got to intermingle and learn about different cultures that I didn't previously. And then we moved like houses to like pretty far away, and it was sort of like Aussie culture again. So I kind of I decided I'm just gonna adopt this culture again. So I played like AFL, that's the thing like judo and and then afterwards I moved to Melbourne, and it was again like multicultural, like a lot of Southern Europeans. So I got a bit more into soccer and things like that. And I'll say, I've been torn between cultures at times, but I'll say it's been a good thing because I got to learn about how different people are in the world, and how to conduct myself with different people. And I got to intermingle and learn about different cultures, and just have fun, have good food, things like that.
So I'm assuming you'd identify with both your Kenyan and Australian culture.
Yeah, fair bit, fair amount, yeah.
What are your dreams and your aspirations for the future, and how do you picture yourself contributing to both the Australian and the African communities?
Well, how I picture myself in the future is I want to continue on with my media journey, like my journey in media and service for others. And I don't really know where it's gonna go into the future because I'm still quite young, but I know that if I just follow this path, I'm gonna succeed. And how I can contribute to the broad Australian community is I want to create something that provides value to their life, and I think that will be a benefit to the African Australian community, is because I can be used sort of as an example on if you just follow the right path and you don't listen to what others have to say about you, you're able to succeed in life.
Now, considering everything we've talked about, is there any advice that you'd like to give to other African Australian youth?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I would say, don't listen to what the media or what anyone has to say negatively about you, and don't listen to people want to say you won't be able to do this. There's not enough Africans here. There's not enough people that look like you here. You'd be surprised how many African CEOs there are, how many board of directors, how many of them be able to rise through the ranks. You'd be surprised. So that's why I say just don't if you have a dream, if you want to be the leader of something or the boss of something or just a manager or even just be able to work there, don't listen to what other people have to say when they say, oh, you can't because of your skin color.
Yeah, you've got to believe in yourself.
Yeah, you've got to believe in yourself. Exactly.
Well, thanks, Sibi, for coming. I know it's difficult to talk about mental health as it is, let alone talking about it in terms of cultural expectations and pressures that we get from people in our cultural communities. Hopefully now that you've shared your story, other people can realise that everyone experiences poor mental health at some point in their lives, and that's okay. So wish you the best of luck in your future endeavours.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.